So the folks at BougeRV just recently released this new product called the Flash 300. It's a power station that's a lower capacity power station. It's just under 300 watt hours capacity, but it's got a lot of other features that you normally only find in power stations that have a significantly higher capacity. So is this worth a look? Let's find out. So whenever a company reaches out to me to review a new power station, and I get offers almost daily to do this, I really don't have time, as I think I mentioned in previous videos, to do all these, and I really don't have the desire to do that either. But what I am looking for are things that are different than things that I have reviewed before. And as I mentioned in the intro, this thing has got some very interesting features that you do not normally see on a power station in this particular capacity class. So let's get this thing out of the box and see what we got. All right, as usual, the typical BougeRV user manual. And just like all of the other BougeRV products I've looked at, they really do a nice job on the user manual. And I'm sure this is no exception. You can tell a lot about a company about the time and attention they put into a quality user manual. So we've got an Anderson connector to an MC4 connector. So that's nice. If you've got solar panels with MC4 connectors, I'm guessing this power station has an Anderson input for solar. We have got a 12 volt car adapter to Anderson. All right, and then we got a standard AC cable. No need to get that out of the bag, just kind of a typical computer AC cable. Now, I will say this design is really kind of unique. It looks like it's got a wireless charger on the top, so that's very cool. But again, not something you commonly see in the 300 watt category. Go ahead and take this cover off. Let's go ahead and power this thing up and see what it looks like. Wow, okay, so that's a very nice display. I don't know how well that comes across. Maybe I can get a close-up of that. But this is really nice. It does show you input watts and output watts on the right-hand side. Shows you if you're inputting watts, how long until the unit is fully charged, and how long until the unit is fully discharged, depending on which direction you're going. So that's very nice. And of course, your overall charge percent, nice big number there. That's the biggest number on the display. I'm just real impressed with how wide and clear and bright that display is. That's very nice. On the DC output side, you've got your standard car charger. There's the Anderson connector on the bottom for solar, and if you're charging from the car connector as well. And then there's a couple of DC 5521 ports here. You've got 4 USB ports. One is a USB PD100, USB-C PD100, and then you've got 3 Type A ports. One is a quick charge port, and then it looks like the other 2 are standard kind of a 12 volt or 12 watt type connectors. Then you've got 2 110 volt AC ports, and these are got these nice rubber stoppers on them. By the way, there's like 3 handles on the top of this thing, and they've got little like rubber coatings on them, so they're super easy to grip. I'm sure I can't explain this satisfactorily through video, but the ABS plastic on this really feels super high quality. I mean, this really feels much higher quality than just about any other power station that I have reviewed. And I'm not saying as good a quality, it feels like it's even better. And I don't say that lightly. It's got a connector on the side here. This is, there's a little reset button here, probably a 15 amp if I had to guess. Yeah, 15 amp overcurrent reset button. And then you got just the connector. So the AC adapter is integrated into this unit, so you don't have an extra AC adapter. All you need is any standard sort of computer style AC cable, and you can charge this thing. So, and there's a light on the back. Let's see what that looks like. Looks like the multiple positions here. Yeah, so that's cool. Kind of a more widely diffused light if you put this on a picnic table or something while you're camping, or maybe you just need to get some light into your tent or camper space. And then the charge controller is also significantly upgraded versus what you would normally expect in a unit in the sub 300 watt hour capacity range. The charge controller will allow you to charge this thing extremely quickly. So you get up to 600 watts of input from AC and from solar. I'm not sure if you heard that. Let me say that again in case you missed it. You can put up to 600 watts of solar into this thing and charge this thing in like a half an hour, which is crazy. So very cool. So we're going to have to go put this thing through the paces and see what kind of performance we can really get out of it. But man, right out of the gate, very impressed with this thing. Let's jump forward and do some testing. Got the DC on. All right, let's go ahead and dial this up to about 4.5 amps. There, 4.47, 4.49. I think that's close enough to 0.2C discharge rate. And so here's the result of that DC capacity discharge test. It kind of gives us a sense of the usable capacity of this this power station. And you can see we got 249 and change watt hours, which is pretty decent. That gives us an efficiency rating of about 87% in terms of the rated capacity of 286 watt hours. So let's continue on and let's do an AC inverter to load test and find out what the AC inverter can really handle on this. Because typically in a power station in this class, it's around 300 watts. Typically you get 300 watts continuous, 600 watts peak, but that is not the case here. The rating on the manual says 600 watts max. So let's find out what that means. Got my wife's trusty 1500 watt hair dryer here. Let's go ahead and turn on the AC inverter and we'll watch the output watts and see what we get. So let's put it to low fan. All right, without changing the temperature, let me take the fan up and see if I can run it a little bit past this without going all the way to 6. So we can pull 500 continuous on this, obviously. So that's excellent for a power station in this capacity class. Let's see if we can exceed that 500 anymore. Let me change the temperature here. So overload, we're getting indication. We're drawing 800 watts, 875. This will shut down on us after a period of time. It's telling us it's not going to handle this for too long. Okay, so that ran about 20 seconds or so before it finally shut down. So that's not bad at all. We can run this thing at 600 watts continuous, and as you saw, we got it all the way up to well over 800 watts, and it ran for about 30 seconds. And that is outstanding for a power station in this capacity class. Hey, if you're finding any of this information useful, I'd appreciate if you give me a thumbs up. That really does help. And let's get back to the review. So as you can see, we can easily get 600 watts continuous out of this thing. So 600 watts max is the max continuous rating for power draw from this AC inverter in this unit in the Flash 300. And we got a little bit more than that for 20, 30 seconds before it finally did shut off. And one thing I always like to check on a power supply is what is the no load draw of the AC inverter, and does it have any sort of parasitic draw from other components that might be running and eating up battery capacity when we don't want it to. And what I found on this is actually this thing runs in what's called eco mode, and it actually automatically sort of polices itself. So how eco mode works is if there is no power draw in or out, and that means the AC inverter is off, nothing is plugged in, nothing's going in, nothing's coming out, within 5 minutes, it's going to go ahead and just shut itself off. So that keeps you from draining the battery unexpectedly through some other parasitic draw. So how eco mode works for the USB ports is if over the course of an hour, you never have anything more than 3 watts being drawn or less than 3 watts being drawn over an hour, it will go ahead and shut off the unit if that's the case. And in the case of the DC and AC outputs, if you have less than 5 watts being drawn over a 1 hour period, it will go ahead and shut off. So that's something you need to keep in mind if you have a very low watt draw type device, or you have something that is very intermittent and that it is not going to draw at least 3 or at least 5 watts over the course of an hour, because this thing will shut off on you. So this thing is very quiet, and when the fan does kick on the rare occasion that it does kick on, I've noticed that it is less than 59 dB based on my little phone decibel recorder. So 58, 59 dB, that's pretty quiet. So I didn't find a problem with this thing when the fan was running for it to be noisy or intrusive in any way. Let's talk about price. This thing retails for $399. I think there will probably be a discount code in the description if you want to go down there and check that out. BougeRV often provides me a discount code that works for some period of time. I don't know what that is at the time that I'm filming this, so you'll have to just go kind of check that out and see. But it does list for $399, and it has a 1-year warranty. Now the battery chemistry on this particular power station is lithium NMC, which is basically the same battery chemistry you get in a Jackery. And this is rated to maintain at least 80% of its capacity over the course of 700 full charge-discharge cycles. Now that is quite a few years. That's probably upwards of 8 or 10 years, depending on how you use the unit. Now another compelling standout feature for the Flash 300, and one that you do not typically see in a power station in this capacity class, is the amount of DC input that you can put into this. You can put 600 watts of solar input into this if you wire it up correctly. Now to do that, you would actually have to wire 4 200-watt panels and into 2 separate sets in series, and then wire those 2 series sets in parallel. Now, if that sounds all very complicated, you know, it is a little bit difficult to explain in a short video like this, and I think I will be doing another video to talk about series and parallel wiring, so stay tuned for that. So we're not going to get into that in any detail in this video, but be aware that you can put in up to 600 watts of solar in this thing, which is significantly more than you can put into something like a Jackery Explorer 1000. So let's go take a look at some solar tests that I did on this thing and kind of just see how that went. All right, let's have a little fun with this Flash 300. I've got a 200-watt panel from BougeRV, rigid panel obviously. I've got a 200-watt panel from All Powers. Now they have similar specs in terms of their voltage output, maximum voltage and maximum amperage. All right, it's very easy to wire these in series. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to take the positive from one panel and the negative from the other panel, and we are going to connect them. And that gives us then a remaining positive and negative cable here that we then connect to our adapter. So our adapter will allow us to put these MC4s right in here, and now we have 2 200-watt panels connected in series, and they output to an Anderson connector that I can then connect to my Flash 300. So let's see how we do. Hopefully this will show up. All right, so we are getting a total of 217 watts right now input from our 2 panels. And I guarantee you that's already better performance than we're going to get out of the Jackery 1000. I've got one panel hooked up in here with MC4 adapter to Anderson, and I am capping out at about 105 watts of input into the Jackery Explorer 1000, if you can make that out. Hopefully you can. 104, 105 watts output. Let's take that same connector right now, and we're going to put it into the small Flash 300 here and see how that does. So the MPPT charge controller is trying to find the maximum power point right now, and it will eventually settle. We are getting 132 watts on the Flash 300, and we were only getting 105 watts from the same connection on the Explorer 1000. So I'm embarrassed for you, Jackery. Getting your butt handed to you by a power station 1/3 your size. All right, let's talk about the pros and cons as I see them. So let's first talk about the pros. There is no AC charge brick in this thing. It's completely integrated. In fact, all you need is a computer style cable to plug that in there, and you can plug it without having an extra AC charge module. And I think that's fantastic. I mentioned fast charge. You can go from 0 to 90% in about 30 minutes. You can go from 0 to 100 in approximately 45 minutes. So that's outstanding to be able to fully charge this thing, and from solar as well if you put enough solar panels on this thing. It really is very impressive. Now another pro for me is build quality. It was clear when I took this thing out of the box just by touching it, putting my hands on this thing. At least on the outside, the materials this thing is made of are top notch, and I would venture to say that this thing, at least the external materials, are of better quality than any other power station that I have reviewed to date. And I don't say, as I mentioned, I don't say that lightly. I actually really believe that. So if build quality is important to you, I think this thing is outstanding in that category. Now, I also like this large multicolor display. I find this display to be one of the best that I have seen in terms of the information you get and just the quality and resolution of the display. I think it's an outstanding display. Now, I like the fact that this MPPT charge controller in here can handle up to 600 watts of DC input. Now, it does have a 45 volt max and a 25 amp max. So you do need to be cognizant of that when you're designing your solar configuration to put into this thing. Now, another pro with this thing is obviously the upgraded AC inverter. It handles 600 watts continuous. Now, this is a pure sine wave inverter, not a modified sine wave inverter. So this is the one that you want, not the one that you don't. And it handles peak watt surges up to around 1200 watts and doesn't shut off instantly, but gives you a few seconds and then it comes down. It can be 20 or 30 seconds depending on the watt input. But I think the inverter capacity of this thing, again, is something that you typically don't find in a power station in this particular capacity range. And last on the pros list for me is that it does support pass-through charging, both AC and DC. So whether you're charging this with solar or charging it through AC, you can actually power devices AC and DC with it at the same time. And as I've said before on this channel, some power stations don't do that. The RockPals in particular is one that often allows you to only do pass-through with DC, but not through AC if you also happen to be charging the. Now let's talk about the cons. Now, one of the things that I mentioned earlier is the eco mode on this and how this thing shuts down if it doesn't get a certain amount of watt input within a certain time frame. There's no way to actually configure that I'm aware of. And if I'm wrong about that, feel free to comment in the comments below, because I would like to know if I somehow missed that. But I don't see a way to configure that as from an end user's perspective. I think those features are hard coded. And if you happen to be someone who has a device that is very intermittent, maybe let's say it only kicks on every 2 or 3 hours, this would be a problem for you, because if it doesn't get, as I said, through AC or DC, at least 5 watt draw within a 1 hour interval, it will shut those ports down on you and just not charge from there on out or not power that device. So just be aware of that. It will absolutely power a 12 volt refrigerator, provided that refrigerator compressor runs at least once per hour. Now the last con that I would point out is that the cost per watt hour of this is a little higher than some other units that you're going to find. But I think it's justifiable in this case because of the upgraded inverter, the upgraded charge controller, and the obviously upgraded build quality in the materials. So this thing is understandably a little bit more expensive than some of the other units that you're going to find in this particular capacity range. So anyway, I hope you found some of this information useful. And if you did, please consider giving me a thumbs up. I would really appreciate that. So that's all I got for you. Do hope to see you in the next one. Until then, have fun out there. And just like all of the other so how eco mode works is if there is, how it works is now if you are using USB devices to charge or power something, how it works, So another feature in this thing that's I think is a very Now the other thing is that, now another con,